A quick note for our listeners. This Radio Parkies presentation is sponsored by YOPN Network and includes people who have been living with Parkinson's for quite some time. The vocal challenges that you hear are due to the progression of this disease as well as deep brain stimulation surgeries. And we come as we are here. Everyone has a purpose and a contribution, and everyone is welcome. Thank you for listening.
You are unique, active, determined, resilient. You are not your diagnosis, and you are not alone. This is Young Onset Parkinson's Network. We believe young onset Parkinson's disease does not define you. You define it. We are a safe place to learn, connect, and engage within a supportive community that actually gets it. Because we've got it too. Welcome to Young Onset Parkinson's Network. Living well starts here.
Tonight, the YOP Network and RadioParkies.com is proud to present Chris Sutphin, also known as Cosmo Perfect on TikTok. Chris talks about mental health and Parkinson's. Then, after 6:30, we have new Ninja Warrior Brian Hill. Brian tells his incredible story beginning with his mother being diagnosed at 23 with Parkinson's. To today, where Brian will be competing in his first Ninja Warrior contest. We'll start off with Chris right after the Luminaires.
Pack yourself a toothbrush, dear. Pack yourself a favorite blouse. And take a withdrawal slip. Take all of your savings out. 'Cause if we don't leave this town, we might never make it out. And I was not born around. Baby, come on. Yeah, we'll fire the bread and say we were not born in sin. And leaving out on your bed, let your mother know it's safe. And by the time she wakes, we'll have driven through each state. We'll have driven through the night. Baby, come on. If the sun don't shine for me too, and if the subway's blurred, the bridge is gray, well, you lay yourself down and dig your grave, or will you run against the dying day? And when we left outside, Pack yourself a toothbrush, dear. Pack yourself a favorite blouse. And take a withdrawal slip. Take all of your savings out. 'Cause if we don't leave this town, we might never make it out.
Can we talk a little bit about mental health and Parkinson's?
That to me is one of the most important yet often missing parts of the conversations that we have whenever you're talking about Parkinson's. For me, I'm more stiff than shaky. I have a slight tremor. You look back to see where, if you could recognize any previous symptoms. And I've gone back, all the way to graduating from high school and going into college. And I kept a journal through all those years. And, looking back on that, I realized I was severely depressed. But this was, 92, 93. Wasn't talked about. We didn't know anything about depression or, getting therapy or whatever. If you did, it was always, some kind of negative connotation.
Right.
But, I went through all that. And part of me thinks that, realizing it now, because once, like you said, I from high school, went to college, was suspended twice from the same university because of academic suspension. That's because of the depression. I didn't know what to do. So, I would go to some of my classes. I would not go to the others. It just snowballed. And it was several years. Many, many years after, until I realized, and a lot of it, I thank Angie, my wife, for that, realizing that, it is real. I still remember this, and she'll never let me forget it. First couple of years when we were married, she had a depressive episode, and I was just like, why can't you just be happy? And number one, that's the wrong thing to say. Number two, that was all I knew about depression and mental health. I had never experienced it, but I'd seen it. But I didn't know how to, point my finger at it and say, this is what it is. I guess just the stigma of mental health that everybody has, that, it all affects us, but, we just don't want to talk about it, kind of thing.
Before words like depression, bipolar, ADD, Asperger's, all kinds of things like that were in our vernacular, we thought those kids in school were just the kids that were causing trouble. They had an attitude problem, right? Mm-hmm. They needed to change their, quote, attitude, just like a depressed person needed to change their attitude. When in fact, now we know many of these situations are chemical and or irreversible and or progressive, and or there are things that people can't control. There's causal and there's chemical. So we're talking about the chemical part of Parkinson's, made worse often by many medications. As we know, we take a medication to fix the medication to fix the medication. So would you say, in your experience with Parkinson's and what you've noticed your friends, is bipolar terribly unlike some of the things we experience with our mental game in Parkinson's? Just curious.
Angie and I have talked about this. She was a psych major, and I was a physics major for years. So that's before I went into computer science. So it's like you said, you get that, the chemical side of it, because it when it all boils down to it, we're just electricity and chemistry. That's how our brains work. But the similarities between some of the symptoms that she has and some of the medications that she has been on and I have taken, the similarities are scary. I can't remember what it was. They tried her on something a couple years ago. But one of the side effects was tardive dyskinesia. And we're sitting there and she's taking this and she's shaking. And I was like, she's like, do I have Parkinson's? And I was like, can you smell? She's like, I can still smell. I was like, no, then you're okay.
Can you smell?
But
The funny thing, you picked out that one thing, right?
you know, there is such a fine line with brain chemistry, I think, as to how it all works. I mean, it's dopamine, serotonin, you know, we're all trying to get that. She has too much. I don't have enough. You know, we can't just swap out. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of similarities, and not just with that one net, but like with the, you know, with the manic states as well. I mean, there's, you know, with depression and bipolar, you're up and you're down. And I mean, I'm like that during the day with Parkinson's. I mean, I feel okay now. 15 minutes, who knows? I mean, you know, the pendulum swings, and sometimes it swings in a wide arc, and sometimes it's just a very short arc. And you can't control that, no matter how hard you try. And I think the harder you try to control it, the worse that it gets, because that just adds more stressors and more external forces in on it. But yeah, there are just so many similarities.
So how long ago were you diagnosed? Just give me an idea.
February was 6 years. I was diagnosed. Confirmation date that I go with was August 3rd, which was my birthday, when I turned 42. So I was like, hey, 42, I remember reading Douglas Adams and, you know, the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Wasn't expecting it to be Parkinson's, but we take what we can get. So yeah, I've been thankfully a slow progression so far. But yeah, this is my sixth year so far. You know, you talk to some and say that, you know, after year 5, the honeymoon phase is over. So I'm anxiously awaiting to see what happens.
I was lucky because I found a psychiatrist in Atlanta who not only doses medicine, but she's my therapist also, which is really nice.
Okay.
And all the depression that I had, that I thought I had all those years ago, like you said, really was the onset of Parkinson's.
Right.
And it wasn't even depression.
I mean, and going back through my journal, like the word apathy comes up almost every page. So, I mean, I've dealt with that. I know
That's how your depression presents, apathy.
I am the king of apathy, it feels like.
Chris, now do you know what triggers your depression since you kept the journal?
I haven't really been able to point it to anything specific. I mean, it always kind of seemed tied to, you know, my kind of self-worth, it seemed. You know, when I felt like I wasn't doing as much as I should, or, you know, things like that, it seemed to be, you know, I seemed to notice it more. But it never really, you know, I couldn't associate it with any one specific.
Do you feel it coming on like during the weeks? Like, because when I went through it, every once a month, I would have had menopause, and I would feel it coming. I knew it was coming. I had to fight it off if I could, but I could never fight it off.
And it is. I mean, I can, yeah, I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes it just hits. I mean, I can, like you're saying, sometimes you can kind of feel yourself gradually building into that. And that goes back to, I mean, it's the chemical balance in your brain. I mean, one thing's tapering off, and, you know, your body needs that. So that triggers, you know, whatever response that whichever chemical you're missing at the time.
Do you ever get the question, how do you have Parkinson's? You're too young. What causes Parkinson's? How do you answer that one?
Probably the first 6 months after I was diagnosed, everybody kept telling me it's not Parkinson's, you're too young. It's probably just Lyme disease.
I get that too. Same thing.
And I was like,
too.
It's not Lyme disease. I'm sorry. You know,
And they tell you lupus or fibromyalgia, or that it's in your head.
Oh yeah. I've had, you know, all of those different ones. You know, you don't see, you know, when you think of Parkinson's, you don't, you know, you see the old shuffly guy, you know, with the you know, the walker in his late 80s and 90s. I mean, my grandfather had it. He was diagnosed late 60s, early 70s, I think. So, I mean, he about 16, 17 years that he lived with it. And I mean, that was really the only association that I had with it. And even after I was diagnosed, the area that I live in, it was 2 or 3 years probably before I even met someone in person that had young onset. I mean, I'd found people on the internet and on TikTok of all places, where I've built, our little parky crew we have. But I mean, that was my only other connection to people with young onset.
Now, why'd you start posting on TikTok?
I wanted to help. I wanted to get the word out and get a conversation going. And it was right about, I mean, the last 2 years have been rough for everybody, whether you have Parkinson's or not. I mean, I work from home. I'm on Zoom calls. I'm on, whatever calls on the internet. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm here all day in front of the computer. I've got a camera. I've got some time. I was like, let's talk about this. And I found some people on there that I was like, they're kind of doing the same thing. And we had similar ideas. And it just kind of, grew. And it's, a lot of my stuff, it's not real in depth, and sometimes it's just, hey, good morning, how you doing? Hope you have a good day. And then I'll kind of branch out into other topics. But it's the big thing, I think, is just wanting to get the conversation going and get rid of that stigma, of mental health that nobody talks about. I mean, it's like you talk about wanting to, throw a rock through the glass ceiling. Well, I want to throw the rock through the glass stigma.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, perfect.
The glass stigma.
And, because I'll face it, it affects us all, whether we want to admit it or not. And it doesn't have to be a negative connotation. So why not just, and especially, I mean, Mike, you've probably seen this as guys, we're not supposed to talk about our feelings.
Oh, rub some dirt in it, you'll be fine.
Yeah. You're just, you'll be fine. My basketball coach comes back, you fall and, you break your leg and it's like, oh, just, walk it off.
Right. That's the worst. And that toxic positivity that you touched on earlier, even that you and I and everyone here has probably participated in at one point when we didn't know better, like just be happy, or what's so terrible, or hey, it could be worse. You could be starving, or you could be in another country that doesn't have this or that or the other. Those are not helpful when we're in the moment. That's like telling somebody who's having a panic attack to relax. We know those things don't work, if it's chemical especially. So how do you handle this when you know that it's like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, that they'll always be waiting, they'll always be coming at you? How do you manage your depression, Chris? And how can we learn from you?
Lots of sarcasm. And I deflect a lot, I'll admit. I mean, that's one of my coping mechanisms that I've discovered. But I think you have to realize, one, that you have it. I mean, it's there. If you like it or not, that's fine. If you don't, that's okay as well. I have tried, like you said, with the positivity. I try my best to be as positive as I can. And there are some times that no matter how hard you try, you just cannot. You have good days, you have bad days. In order to appreciate those good days, you have to experience the bad days. Not just because of whatever your emotions are, being a sine-like wave, ups and downs. You have to experience the bad or the dark times so that you can recognize them, and then you can apply that and recognize the good times. It's not easy.
But part of this is recognizing when things are going okay, so that you can develop those skills and tools for when the times go bad, and expecting that anything can happen, correct?
It is, yeah. I mean, we said earlier, it can change, day to day, hour to hour sometimes.
I'm really into this mental health concept, and we're going to do a series on the show about some ways to overcome it. But my biggest issue that I've had is that when I got diagnosed, nobody said a word
Oh, no.
about the mental health aspect. So from an advocacy standpoint, the big question is, how do we reach these physicians that are being completely clinical
Yep.
and educate them and train them to make sure you say that?
My friend Eric and he runs Gray Strong Foundation.
Ray Strong. Yeah, he's great.
And his thing is working on, I mean, he's got kind of a checklist, a guide, the Don't Panic guide that you go through. And it's, do you have movement disorder? Do you have neurologists? Do you have psychiatrists? Do you have
Right.
Your network.
neurologist? And I mean, it goes through all of those. And talking about, it's funny you mentioned with that, I sent out kind of a feeler, and that's one of the podcast episodes that I've got drafted out in my little book here, is about that very same thing. Because I asked, I was like, what was your experience like right after diagnosis? I mean, how was it? Was it good? Did your doctor say, hey, here's what you need, here's who you need to talk to? Or did you just get a pamphlet? Come
Did
back
you read
and,
my blog? That's exactly my first line.
and come back in 6 months.
4
Call
months.
us,
Yep.
call us if you need us. I love my neurologist to death. I found out from a voicemail. It was right after I'd had the DAT scan. And she told me, that it was kind of confirmation. She's like, your results came back and, we're pretty sure it's Parkinson's. We've got an appointment set up for you for a movement disorder specialist. You won't be able to see her for, 8 months.
And that was it. Yours was done over the phone.
Well, initially, I mean, I had a follow-up appointment with her and went back in and talked, and, we kind of went through and hashed some things out. And that's another important thing too. I mean, look, we have to be our own best advocate in this. No one else is going to do it for us. The doctors, while they know the clinical side of it, unless they have Parkinson's, they don't know what it's like. They can see, they can recognize, but get a notebook, write everything down in it, take it to your appointments, and don't leave until they answer your questions.
It turns out that when someone is faced with depression, the non-depressed partners or friends or coworkers often feel sort of helpless and confused because depression's hard to communicate. I mean, if you're withdrawing, as you mentioned, apathy, Chris, it affects your relationships. How can we prevent our relationships from, being decimated by this ongoing anxiety / depression that we experience with Parkinson's?
You've got to work at it. It's communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. I mean, whether you want to talk or not, in your relationships, you have to. Going back to what I said earlier with Angie and just not knowing what the signs and symptoms were of depression, you got to put in some effort. I mean, you've got to learn, and your partner has to learn to recognize these different phases. I mean, and she noticed it too. She's like, you're getting kind of quiet, you're kind of reserved, you're not. We kind of call it that we're not being participatory.
Well, it's a collection of symptoms, right? Like irritability, fatigue. I mean, some of these things listed here, sleep patterns.
And all of those build on each other. And with, the ups and downs, and Mike, like you saying earlier, you can recognize when they're coming on. If you notice those and I'm not going to say embrace them. If you realize and accept that they're going to happen and this is happening, and you can pinpoint where you are in that cycle, then you can say, okay, I'm going to need, I need a little extra me time. I need to just, I want to go sit quietly in my chair for a little while and pretend like I'm reading, but I'm.
And it's not you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset with you. I just can't be there for you right now.
I fought with that with Angie. I mean, with her ups and downs, I would think that it was something I'd done. And like you said, Ellen, it's not. It's nothing anyone else has done. There could be no external influence at all. It's all internal.
Mhm.
It could have nothing to do with anything. It's just something happened in our brain, and that day that chemical just went. And
So treatment includes a therapist, or at least somebody to talk to who is not emotionally entrenched with you, right? It includes touchstones or friends or family who understand what depression is. And then it also includes good communication. So far, we've been over those three things. What else can we do?
Exercise.
yeah, I try to ignore that one. No, I just no.
I'll tell you though, that changed all of our lives. I think
it does. I actually started the big program 2 weeks ago. Finally found someone in the area that's certified for it, and
oh, good, perfect.
And man, let me tell you, those physical therapists. I mean, I've had physical therapy before. This is different.
And
are you in an exercise program?
It's just the Live Strong, the LSVT.
Oh, okay.
And you don't realize they added the 1 pound weights to my wrists and ankles last week. And you think that 1 pound really weighs that much?
Mike does 200 pounds on each leg. He can lift a car now, right, Mike?
Not maybe a small car.
Okay,
Very
a
tiny
matchbox car.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. Like, I mean, I've always been active and always, worked outside and done stuff. And, you realize, so one, and I don't know if it may just be age as well. And, it's Parkinson's, we realize that one, we can't do things exactly the same way as we used to. We're still the same person. We're still us. We just have to do things a little bit differently, and figuring that out. I equate it to, I always grew up, we worked on our own vehicles, did our own maintenance. I could change tires, brakes, oil change, blah blah, all that.
Well, where you been? Come
I was
on
gonna
up.
say, can you come over?
I would gladly. I mean, I love doing stuff like that. I love tinkering with stuff. That's how my brain works. I was the kid that you gave him a radio or something, for as just to occupy my time, and a screwdriver, and I would be fine for hours.
The radio's all broken on the kitchen counter. Chris.
No, I got them back together. There may be screws missing, but they got it back together and they were working.
We got
Are you still, because what I have found, I think for all of us, is doing what you love, whatever that is, as a part of your therapeutic.
I try
needs.
to. There's some things that I know that I'm not sure if I'm ready to get back into that, because I think they will frustrate me more. Part of it, and that's kind of why I think I've put golfing off for a while too, because I love playing. I love golfing and nothing else. You're outside, you're walking around. But my left side is my affected side, and my grip has gotten so weak. I don't know if I would be able to control or hold the club. So I'm going to kind of like go out in the backyard for a while once, the weather finally does break, and try to get back into that. But yeah, I mean, I've tried, and I've explored some other hobbies and as well. I used to do a lot of photography.
But what do you want to do for Parkinson's?
I want to get people talking. And I'm by no means a mental health professional. I'm just a guy from Southwest Virginia that has this disease that likes to ask questions and likes to figure things out. And that was kind of the reasoning behind the website I set up. And
what's the address for that?
Parky.tv.
Oh, it's a TV channel. Tell me more.
PARKIE. But my whole idea was that I wanted it to be a place for people just to, I don't know, not so much showcase, but just tell stories. I mean, if you wanted to come on and, you have a YouTube channel, or if you just want to upload a video about talking about something, hey, put it on there. I don't care. Let's get this conversation going and continue it, because we will learn more from each other by talking about our symptoms and talking about how we relate and react to our symptoms than any neurologist or any movement specialist will ever be able to, in my opinion.
So what I want to ask you is, or say and ask you, is that every single person we talk to and each other, we've all had these very, very, very similar situations, from the mental health aspects to just learning about each other and socializing. And everybody, it just seems that there's a lot of us now. And I think what's happening is that, I don't know, and you guys may know this answer better, but I don't know if there's just more of us being diagnosed, or if because I'll tell you, in my PD boxing program in Atlanta, the YOPD group got exponentially bigger in the last 4 years since I was diagnosed. And we all have a very similar story. So if we could pick 3 things that we would like to tell people who are newly diagnosed, besides don't panic, it's like, what do we tell them? What do we say to these people? If you could give them 3 pieces of advice.
If I were to go up to them and would talk about this, one, like you said, don't panic. Your life isn't over. If you need examples, just Google, just go look at people. I mean, I've seen people that are doing stuff with Parkinson's that with Anna talking, was it last month in the YOPN meeting, they were doing the rock wall. I don't know if I could have done that, before Parkinson's, but that's the mindset that you have to develop. So, I mean, it's, your life isn't over. You're still going to continue doing what you're still who you always were. That part hasn't changed. 2 is that learn as much, be your own best advocate. You have to keep track. You have to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And don't be afraid. Like if your doctor or your neurologist or somebody says, hey, I want you to try this, and you take it and you feel horrible or you have whatever, tell them. Do not be afraid to look and say, no, that doesn't work for me.
And if they don't listen to you, make a change.
Find another doctor.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And that is a very important thing too, with not only with that, but with therapists, with any medical professional that you have with. You have to have some kind of rapport with them that you can communicate and talk to them, because if you don't, you're not doing either of you any good. And then 3rd, I think you have to find your group, your support group, whether it be a local group, whether it be online, whether it be family. You just have, and it doesn't have to be extreme. It can just be 1 or 2 people, but you have to find someone that you can talk to during those good times, and especially during those bad times.
Yep. And you know what? The best place that I found was I joined a PD specific boxing gym. And we it's like, how you doing today? So-and-so. I'm good. Okay. How do you really feel? Well, I didn't sleep last night, and I get a lot of information from people that I socialize with from apart. Now, I don't need my life to be only Parkinson's people, but right. It does, that one bucket is a nice bucket to have.
And that's, you saying with that about the I'm fine. How many times has that been
what else do you say? Well, I haven't slept. I'm manic. I'm depressed. I did this. I did that. I can't walk. I can't move. It becomes that you feel like you're burdening people. So what else do you say? I'm okay. I take it day by day.
And a lot of times I've noticed too, especially with that, if you're talking to someone else that has it, you don't have to say a lot for them to know.
No. Yes.
You can just say, you're just like, I'm having one of my days or having one of those days, and they get it. You understand. And then, they may be having a great day. And you can draw off of that to kind of help pull you up a little bit. And then the next day it may be reversed. And you may be having a good day. And
Yeah.
you know, another friend is not having such a great day. And then you can share that back.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
I go into my neurologist's office the first day and she's like, okay, and, you know, we talked and she watched me walk in. She's like, you've either had a stroke or you have Parkinson. Which one do I pick?
Was there empathy in that statement?
Not in that initial statement, but once we started talking after that, and she's like, you know, I want you to, she says, I want to do, you know, go have an MRI to rule out stroke and all that stuff. And once all of that was done, and, you know, we started the conversation, started on that process, yes, that empathy did come out. I have been very thankful and very blessed by the physicians that I have worked with, because they have both been just so supportive. And they'll talk to me like I'm a person. You know,
I like what Ellen brought up, though. That does happen to a lot of us. I like how they treat you like a person. What else do they do right? I want to hear more, because we hear a lot of terrible stories.
There are. I mean, it's just, you know, you get just the very one of the other. So I saw two movement specialists at two different universities, and one that I really wanted to go to because that's where I went to school at. We didn't have that rapport. I didn't feel that. And the other MDS that I went to, it was almost, we just clicked. Everything just went smoothly. I mean, I feel like I could just call her right now and just talk to her like I'm talking to you guys. And I realized I've talking with others that experience is not common.
Would you rather have a doctor who was rude and really good at diagnosing and really good at what they did? Or would you rather have a doctor that might make some mistakes but is kind to you? There must be a middle way, like some sort of compromise.
I mean, we've all watched House, I'm sure. I mean, that's, you know, he was brilliant. His bedside manner wasn't that great, but, you know, it's a tough call to see, because, you know, you want the best care for yourself, but that care is not only, I think, the medical side of it, but the emotional side of it as well.
How do we change that stigma? How do we, that's, to me, that's what we need to be advocating for, because it starts there. That's the first entree into this whole situation, is that appointment, that first appointment.
I don't know if we just have to be obnoxious and loud and just keep hammering that info out there until, you know, it hits a critical mass that we realize that's what we need to do. But it is so important to just, and it's going to come from us. I mean, I don't think there's going to be some, you know, medical revolution that all of a sudden the doctors realize that, hey, because I don't think that happens. I think it happens with other diagnoses as well.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
That it's, you know, you have this, because, I mean, look, they're seeing people after people after people. And I'm sure, and even, you know, they may, with their best intentions, may want to, but it may just be that their just schedule is just packed that day.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
I've met 30, 35 people on TikTok that are young onset Parkinson's. Surprised me. I mean, just the number of people that I've met. And I mean, it's, you know, that's turned into, you know, we have a weekly support group call.
That's great.
And it's just, you know, it's,
who can join your support group, Chris?
Anyone can join. I think I've got a link, if I remember correctly, on the Parky TV site.
You do. I just signed up.
Okay. That'll send an email. Just enter your information, and, you know, we'll send out info from there. Eric also posts, because the support group is through the graystrong.org, and that's gray with an A.
So, Chris, I want to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is, what is your biggest fear at this point in your life?
My biggest fear? Wow. If I'd wanted, okay, brutal truth, honesty, my biggest fear is what's going to happen tomorrow. I've started noticing some dystonia on my right side every so often, usually when my meds get really low. You know, what does that mean? What does that signal? We don't know. I don't know. Nobody can tell me. So truthfully, if, deep down, brutal honestly for myself, my biggest fear is what's going to happen tomorrow.
You told me it was clowns.
I'm learning to not be so scared of clowns.
What makes you happy?
Oh, just helping others, just doing, tomorrow we've got a community breakfast that we do every once a month when the church is here. And that thing's been going on for, last month was 46 years that they've been doing it. And before COVID hit, it was 46 years, it was every Saturday. And since COVID hit, we've gone to just like once a month. But just going and, I help cook and prepare the food for that. And just doing that part. And just, my grandfather, and the two things that I've learned from him that stick with me the most, one is Parkinson's related and one is not. The one that is not Parkinson's related was this: if you have the ability to help someone or to bless them with one of your gifts that you have, it is your obligation to do so. And not only that, but if someone on the opposite side, if someone is trying to help you or bless you with one of their gifts, it is your obligation to accept that gift. Because if you don't, you are denying them their blessing that
That's good.
Beautiful.
The second thing that I got from him, Parkinson's related, is that I'll never forget. So he would sit in his living room, and this is after it was advanced. I mean, when he got to the point that he really struggled with walking. And he says, we were sitting there one day and he was looking out the door and he says, Chris, he says, if I could just get up and go out and just sweep the porch, I think I'd feel better. And he says, I hear his voice when I'm feeling really bad and not, don't want to do stuff or just struggling. I hear his voice just saying, you have to get up and keep moving.